Today we will be exploring on financing the future of nature, biocultural innovation and scale. But to explore that, we will first need to delve into what are the barriers, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and how do we integrate ancestral wisdom with, in this case, emerging technologies and financial flows, and rewire the frameworks connecting them in order to innovate at scale for nature conservation. Well, welcome. My name is Carlo Angeles. I am Director of Impact at C-Minds. C-Minds is a think tank that works on the intersection of ancestral knowledge and emerging technologies, founded by the amazing Constanza Gomez-Mont, who has been working on AI for the past 15 years. Today we have an amazing panel. We have here Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez is the co-founder and president of Fab Lab, which is the Latin American network of Fab Labs, which promote technological democratizations through inclusive projects such as the amazing Amazon Floating Fab Lab. And he will be sharing more about also Regen, a project which he is leading on integrating precisely that, emerging technologies with ancestral knowledge for traceability and for innovating with, well, I will let Benito explain much more on that. Walia Jones is the former director of the US Department of Energy's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs. She was responsible for upholding and advancing the Office of Indian Energy's mission to maximize the development and deployment of energy solutions. She is a member of the Navajo Diné Nation and comes from northern Arizona. And finally, also Aldo is with us today. Aldo is the co-founder and managing director of Amazonia Impact Ventures, where he leads innovative impact investing strategies that foster sustainable economic development with regenerative strategies. So let's first start by diving into these three lenses: the territorial stewardship, the biocultural entrepreneurship, which Benito will share more about that, and the catalytic capital, how these three connect, and that actually these work together to outline how systems can truly regenerate at the territory, at scale to regional and global actions. So I would like to start first with Walia. Walia, you have worked to ensure that energy and finance systems recognize indigenous sovereignty, but systems have not recognized the indigenous systems of knowledge in the way that, for example, when asking for financial capital or access to the markets, they ask for, there are some barriers that you have faced, such as when they ask for collaterals, for instance. So I want to ask you, there's a misalignment with collective land rights or community-based economies with the current global capital system. So my question would be, from your experience, what does this reveal on how the finance system is structured? And how could actually these systems be reimagined to meet not only the needs, but also the realities of territories?
Is this on? All right, great. Thank you, that's a great question. I spent 4 years with the federal government and was able to see in the US, I'm just speaking in the US, that the challenges and barriers to financing renewable energy projects, or really energy projects, was really challenging when it comes to the utility scale, like multi-million-dollar projects. And I think, you know, this, speaking mostly for the US, but also wanting to give you sort of an overview about indigenous peoples globally. They make up about, I would say, 6% of the global population. They steward about 20% of lands globally. They also take care of, I say, is indigenous peoples' lands and territories make up about 80% of the biodiversity in the world. And so indigenous peoples, in thinking about the topic that we're talking today, hold a lot of power in stewarding their lands, but also opportunity in the way that they move forward to maintain a balance of building an economy that is aligned with their values and their systems, but also with, in most developed countries that I know of, around sovereignty, around self-determination. Many times the barriers, as you're asking, is access to capital. And so we're here at SOCAP, and if you don't know these numbers, these are really strong numbers. If you're interested in impact investing, if you're interested in decarbonization, if you're interested in self-determination of indigenous peoples, there are huge amounts of opportunity. And I think that the way to move forward in ensuring that indigenous peoples have the opportunity to generate revenues, generate economy. Sadly, the structures in place, especially in the United States, is that it's based off policies like designed back in the 1800s, where most reservations are called trust lands. And so tribes, they can't use lands like as collateral to get a loan from a bank. I mean, I think there's been a lot of conversations probably in these last few years around the challenges of why tribes cannot access capital to be able to spark that economic engine within their own territories and design it in a way that is aligned with their values as tribal citizens. We have 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and interesting enough is I've been traveling the last 6 months and seeing this also in New Zealand with Maori people, similar policies in Australia, in the Philippines. And I think there is a interest here in these policies, but also trying to design a strategy to be able to make sure that tribes have an ownership stake in these projects, tribes, that there is a design where they are in the leadership of these projects and they are actually generating revenue that will contribute to the health, the well-being of their people, but it has to be regenerative. And I think that's the paradigm that I'm excited about and wanting to encourage a different way of energy development in this world. Right now, it's been very extractive, and looking forward to continuing to co-create with other indigenous communities and people around a different paradigm that is aligned with our values and our teachings of who we are. Because in the end, as far as when we go back home, it's all about nature. We are not separate from that nature. Our teachings and our understandings are aligned with nature. So I want to encourage more investment in indigenous peoples and projects, because it's going to be good not only for the people, but for everybody else, and it's a learning process to generate more partnerships and collaboration.
Amazing. Thank you, Alia. And I think that what you were mentioning, it's rewiring the current system, which actually leads us to redefining value. As you mentioned, indigenous communities steward the lands in which the nature conservation projects take place, in which there are huge opportunities for economic development, and in that context, impact on the environment and also on the communities, but also considering that the stewardship does not only impact that community specifically, but overall the broader city, state, nation, and even the world. So with this idea of redefining value, I think this is very closely connected with you, Benito. You have been part of what you share is that considering nature as a co-founder not as a stakeholder, not as something around the business, but actually as a co-founder when you do a startup, which I think it's amazing. So how do you think that connects with what Walia was sharing on redefining value, and how that actually shift the way we design innovation and entrepreneurship for regeneration?
Oh, great. Thank you, Carlo, and thank you, friends, to this opportunity to share ideas. Well, definitely this switch from nature as a part of the periphery of our decision, as an object, no? Switch from this concept, this paradigm, to a nature that is inside of our decisions, of our organization. It's the center of the organization. It is a 180 degrees turn. And this is not something that we invented. This is a paradigm that the indigenous communities, for example, in the Amazon rainforest where I come from, they live like that. No? For the Amazon people, nature is not something outside. It's not an object that I can use or overexploit. It's inside the community. It's part of the community. It's the most important member of the community. So I honor it. I care about nature. And this is a challenge for us, especially in our society where we are more human-centered innovation or human-centered economy. It is a challenge to switch to a nature-centered economy or nature-centered innovation. It's to bring voice to nature. No? It's switch from democracy to naturecracy, or from to see nature as an asset to see nature as an investor of any of our entrepreneurs or projects that we have. No? And this is not our invention. No? It is how native communities have developed a relationship, a symbiotic relationship with nature, both empowering the others. No? Nature empowering culture, and culture increasing biodiversity. In this knowledge, or in this sense, we can find a lot of opportunities to innovate in many different aspects of education, new industry, etc. So to switch from a human-centered innovation to a nature-centered innovation, it's a great opportunity for all of us to find more solutions for the global challenge.
Thank you, Benito. So I think both you and Walia agreed that we need to redefine value, we need to redefine priorities, and even our co-founders when we are approaching different projects, different initiatives, different startups. And that process of redefining value, I think you both are pointing that it should start in trust with the communities, trust among the partners, and in the design process itself. So I would like to take that to link to you, Aldo, because I think that you are actually trying to move the needle of capital so that capital can actually meet these new types of designs, this new type of redefining value, working very closely with communities, and actually working on at scale with communities, projects, businesses that impact local economy, but actually regenerate the landscapes and build into bigger impact, as I mentioned, not only for the community, but working in a hotspot of biodiversity, which actually impacts the world. So I would like to ask you, Aldo, because you shared with us that it's not only about capital, but also about technical assistance, which is as important as capital. Even before the capital arrives, technical assistance must take place so that they can access to the capital itself. So I wanted to ask you, how can these systems be structured so it builds autonomy, long-term capacity, and not creates dependencies itself?
Thank you, Carlo. What we do basically is we try to mobilize capital to the Amazon region, which is, of course, incredible and key for the planet's survival, but also completely underserved in terms of capital and finance. Just in case of Peru, for example, only 3.7% of all the credits, all the loans, are going to this region, to the Amazon region. And the Amazon region covers 75% of the whole country. And if we look the situation of indigenous populations in the Amazon, less than 7% have access to the formal financial system. If we think about women producers, for example, in agriculture, 93% of them don't have access to loans. So that means they can't invest, they can't buy, tools or inputs for their farms. They depend on their husband or partner. So it's a big inequality also in terms of gender. So what we do basically is we try to mobilize that capital and provide that capital to small and medium enterprises. And this is particularly important because in the Amazon, also again focusing in Peru, 98% of the enterprises are micro and micro and medium enterprises. So, I mean, almost all the enterprises are really small, micro, small, and medium. Sorry. So that says a lot of things. That says there are not big companies, and that most of the labor are generated in these very small companies, and it's very difficult for them, as I said, to access finance. So we work with them. We think that working with them, we can, of course, create jobs and improve the livelihoods of local people, but also we can create economic alternatives in that region, which actually economic alternatives are very, very scarce. And if you don't have a economic alternative, then you have illegal loggers, illegal miners putting pressure on the lands of indigenous peoples, right? And we don't want to see that. I mean, it's happening, of course, already in the whole Amazon, and even more and more with the price of gold rising until a few weeks ago. The illegal mining has spread a lot in the Amazon. But going to your question, Carlo, so we do provide loans to them, to small and medium enterprises, but we think also it's super important to provide technical assistance. Why? Because I think it's too cold to just provide a capital, right? In order to create a long-term relationship with each enterprise, you need to build trust. And to build trust, you need to be present. You need to communicate with them. You need to listen to them. And you can only do that going to the field, staying with them in the field, providing assistance. So the technical assistant give us the opportunity to spend more time in the field with them. And what we've seen is also that when we have that capacity, because it's not easy to have the resources to provide technical assistance for an impact fund, we have better results. Also what we've seen is that, and that's also because in our model, the instruments that the loans that we provide are always tied to specific impact KPIs, like, for example, regenerating the land with agroforestry systems or protecting primary forests. And we work with a lot of smallholder associations and cooperatives. So they are the stewards of the land, they own the land, they can protect the forest, and they can regenerate also degraded lands. So with every loan that we provide, we always agree on certain impact goals. And if we don't have that capacity to provide technical assistance, or if we have that capacity, we see better results also in that sense, better impact. So we think that's key, but of course, is the challenge of having the resources. And I think the role of catalytic investors are key in that sense, because they are the ones that they can really provide the type of capital that really allow us to support these kind of enterprises and provide, at the end, and achieve a higher impact.
Thank you, Aldo. So we have seen about redefining value. We have gone through nature-driven innovation, and as Aldo was sharing with us, also the assistant through the overall process with the connecting thread, which is trust among the implementing partners. And I would like to focus on this before jumping to our next section, in which I would like to jump into the biocultural approach, which is what gathers us today. We have the context, we have the elements of the biocultural approach, but what is the biocultural approach? And the biocultural approach is that we acknowledge that economic resilience and cultural resilience of the communities that steward the land are vital to the stewardship of the environment and the land itself. So building into this, Walia, you were sharing that there were some barriers that did not fully acknowledge these super important assets that community stewards for these projects to be possible, such as the land, such as knowledge, and continuity. So I wanted to come back to you, Walia, and ask you, once these barriers have been overcome, once these barriers have been removed, what does it take, what do you think it takes to build biocultural enterprises that can thrive within their territories and are bound to survive only by donor cycles?
I mean, this is a great topic right now where in the US you've seen, I think about in Department of Energy, they canceled about $28 billion worth of federal government money that was gonna go to energy projects in September. So you have about over 200 projects in the US that need funding, right? They need investment. And then when you take those 200 plus projects that need investment, you look at the tribal projects, and there's tons of tribal projects that are worth probably over $500 million projects. And this is, I think we're at this part where the need for investment is critical, and that the structure, again, back to the paradigm of structuring and designing projects where it's not extractive, where tribes can, from the beginning, own 10% of the project. And in that, in long term, as you continue to move through, as the project grows, tribes can have the option to continue to own more than 10%. And this is just like an idea of like how generation of revenue can start. In this, most of the renewable energy projects we've seen, tribes, the way that they're participating are leasing land. And it's actually true for a lot of projects internationally on indigenous people's land. They're leasing land, and they don't get a lot back from that in the long term. They're giving up land for the next 30 plus years that could have gone to maybe something else. So how are we looking at even these structures of design so there is co-ownership for the tribe, that the fact that in like the GDP countries, like I think it's been really low. It's like 1 to 3% that indigenous communities are participating in the GDP nationally, and this is in developed countries. And that's very low. And you hear all the stories of our communities infrastructure failing or not there. Healthcare systems are not there. And I think going back to the biocultural approach is, one, I think investments or investors need to be not scared to invest in indigenous communities and tribal nations. It's gonna be uncomfortable, but I think it's a huge learning curve to understand what tribes are about and what they care about, which is about the regenerative lifeways that make them who they are. The other part is that the trade association industries also shouldn't be scared to work with tribes. In government, there's a lot of, I've seen it, like people are not excited. I mean, they're scared mostly because they don't know how to approach tribes and indigenous peoples. And I think there's something there that I think we gotta stop. I don't know, it's just, you gotta take the leap. And it goes back to the trust building. It goes back to a partnership that could be really beautiful. A partnership that can really seed a way of life that is interdependent on each other. So it's not just tribal, but it's interdependent on one another as community, as collective, but also a responsibility, because tribes know the land so well, they know the waters so well, they know this whole region so well because they have that ancient wisdom and knowledge within them. They're not going to disclose that to you, but there is something there that is really important for our survival. And it goes back to also our language and our indigenous language and ways of life that needs support drastically. Every 2 weeks, indigenous languages are being lost. And this is a side passion of mine, but I see it happening even in my nation, that if we don't do anything to support indigenous languages to continue, there's that wisdom and knowledge that is just right here that might be gone. And I think that's an urgent call to action. I know this is not the space, but I think when you invest in indigenous projects, indigenous peoples, you're going to be also investing in the language and the culture.
Fantastic. And as you were sharing, Walia, there is this interrelationship between economic resilience, cultural resilience, and of course, the stewardship of the land and regeneration processes. And you were sharing about the indigenous communities work participating as shareholders in projects, as co-founders in projects, and I think that connects with what you were sharing, Benito, on having communities and also nature as co-founders. And I would like to jump back to you. You have been prototyping with ideas, projects that merge frontier knowledge, frontier technologies, such as, biofabrications to community labs. And I want to ask you, how can innovation systems be designed so that local knowledge isn't just part of the process, but actually it's the intellectual backbone of the regeneration projects that, in which you work?
Well, thank you. Before that, I would love to add to what Lia said in terms of the language. We are losing language, we are losing culture, and this is extremely important because we are not just losing biodiversity in our forests. When we lose the biodiversity, we are losing the culture that are linked to the forest. And for example, in the case of the Amazon, more than 90% of the young population want to live. They don't find opportunities in the Amazon to develop their capabilities, or the opportunities that they have are, narcoterrorism, illegal mining, etc. No? So preserve the nature is linked to preserve the culture that for years have developed many practices that are more than urgent for the today's challenge that we have today. No? In terms of the how can we link it, ancestral knowledge with new technologies to preserve biodiversity and to facing many challenges in the world? I remember one history that my father told me about one fruit that he ate, no? And the Ashaninkas community in the Amazon ate to protect their teeth, not per hours, per days. No? Imagine that, I don't know, a product that can protect your teeth per weeks. This is something that we cannot find in the traditional markets, no? But this is part of the ancestral knowledge. So I tried to do it. I tried to experiment with myself with this fruit, but it caused any effect in me. No? I say, Father, are you kidding me when you told me that, no, about the property of this plant? Because I am trying to protect my teeth with that, but it's not working. And he laughed a lot, and he said to me, it doesn't work like that. No? You have to consider it when, where, who, etc. I mean, the property or the impact of the biodiversity is completely linked to the knowledge, no, about many different stages that you have to consider. And the advantage that we have with the indigenous community is that they have developed all this knowledge by generations. For example, today's global trends like, for example, circular economy, zero waste culture, even regenerative culture or economy is something that the indigenous communities practices for all the life. No? When you eat a fruit and you will drop the peel, it is a fertilizant for the soil, or it's a new leaf with a seed. No? So I think first of all, it's a humility attitude to recognize that our modern culture have a lot to learn from the ancient communities and the ancient knowledge, and the ancient knowledge could empower the biodiversity properties, and we could find amazing solutions. Part of our job is bring to local communities access to high technologies, for example, artificial intelligence, with ancestral intelligence to generate new products to preserve their species that are in risk of extinction. For example, this plant that have not a commercial attraction today, no, but it's important for the ecosystem. So they are exploring with these labs, we call the Forest Lab, how can we create a new economy based in the species that are in risk of extinction without to cut any trees, no, or supporting the life in the forest. No? So in essence, the connection in between nature and ancestral knowledge is not a romantic action. No? It's not an anthropological or maybe a melancholical action. It's a creative and a looking forward action.
Amazing. Thanks, Benito. And I love when you say that this is not a romantical, melancholical relationship, but I would say, as you were sharing, rather a bi-directional learning process in which each of the different stakeholders bring different systems of knowledge to co-create something new. And taking that, I would love to go back to you, Aldo, because when these different systems of knowledge converge and for different initiative projects for your regenerative action, these projects, I mean, the metrics behind these projects do not really fit into traditional investment instrument models. So how has it been for you to redefining the metrics, redefining investment thesis and the investment approach when addressing these new kind of regenerative projects?
When we started, like about 5 years ago, we started thinking. I mean, we want to mobilize capital to the Amazon, what kind of instruments we can use, what are the investments, what are the opportunities. Carbon projects were a big, there was a lot of appetite for carbon projects in that moment. But we started talking and calling a lot of companies, enterprises in the Amazon. We talk with more, I would say, like 50 cooperatives, small enterprises, medium enterprises, and different actors. And we were listening to them and hearing the same things. We need working capital. We have the products, we have sometimes the buyers, but we don't have liquidity. We need working capital to really be able to buy from the farmers, aggregate that, process it, and sell it. So it was very simple in some way, but very important, right, for them. So we came with this idea of, okay, let's focus on that. Let's provide them with working capital if we can, but in a way that we make sure that is helpful, right, and not just the capital by itself. So I would say listening is key to understand really the needs of the population, of the communities, and also how we structure these investments have to be aligned of basically the land and nature, right? So we can provide finance that is not aligned with the crop cycles or even with the ecosystem cycles, right? When the waters in the Amazon goes up and down, basically it's a completely different forest. So the investment needs to be aligned with that in order to work. Otherwise, we will have problems. And we have also to understand and accept that we're not investing, like in the city, in a factory in the city. So there will be some years that the production of Brazil nuts, for example, will be lower than the other year, right? And it's just because the ecosystem works like that, and it reacts to climate patterns, etc. So we have to listen. We have to structure these investments following the rhythms of nature of the communities. And I think also needs to be patient in terms of an understanding in terms of the challenges that these communities in these geographies face, right? We're talking about different, well now, changing climate patterns, a lot of challenges in terms of transportation, sometimes security also in some of these regions. So all of that have to be into consideration, I would say. Yeah, I think I will leave it like that because we don't have much time.
Fantastic. But before jumping into the Q&A, I would like to briefly go back to you, Walia, because Aldo was sharing, and I think that's something that has been settled in this panel throughout the different interventions, that we need to acknowledge, first, we need to understand that this financial flow must follow and meet the rhythm of nature, not the other way around, because it's impossible. And also that these new financial flows must acknowledge the different resources that are in play for these projects, like we said in the beginning, the knowledge, the different land stewardships. So I wanted to ask you super briefly before jumping into the Q&A, Walia, how do these systems, what kind of safeguards we can put in place so that these new financial flows does not take sovereignty of the communities, but actually strengthen their sovereignty?
I mean, I think we covered a lot of it around making sure that, one, tribes, indigenous peoples have the resources to be able to, like the technical assistance, the legal strategy and support that is needed when they're facing like deal structuring. That was one thing that in many of these big projects, tribes just didn't have that capacity. So I think given if tribes were able to have resources, capacity, technical assistance, the support they need to really be at the table and design a project or projects that fit their needs. I mean, that right there is self-determination. We have been used to a more paternalistic approach to business development, which is leaning on a company or somebody else to do it for us, or consultants to come in that aren't from the community and nation to do it for us. And today we're seeing beautiful trends of indigenous-led businesses that are designing projects that are aligned with their values, but also with the territories they're operating in. And that's significant when you see that. And like, we have Navajo Power here as an example, you know, Brett Isaac, and so many examples of indigenous-led businesses that are taking matters in our own hands. And I always have this philosophy is like, the power is in our hands. It's right here. We don't have to go anywhere else. It's all right here. We have the intellect and the spirit to guide us from where we come from. And it's just that somewhere, somehow, maybe we lost confidence. And this, I'm just speaking from, like, as a tribal member from here, from the United States. And I think that that confidence piece is one that can take you a long ways. And I've seen beautiful magic happen, you know, where projects actually continue to thrive and be aligned with the values and the systems that ancestors have been pushing for, right? The sovereignty, the self-determination aspects of who we are. And I see that for our future generations, and I think people are already doing and demonstrating that. But I also know that there is interest that isn't aligned with the indigenous values, that has extracted a lot from our communities that we can learn from, but we should not repeat that. Those models of extractive economic models are long gone. Like this is a new, I say, indigenous century that we're in right now. And I see our future generations even going further and making sure and implementing that, you know, the rights of indigenous peoples are honored, but also the rights of nature are upheld, because that's exactly what it's about.
Amazing. Thank you, Walia. And I think that's a great way to start with our Q&A. I think we have 2 questions, so maybe I can read them and we can do a quick round of to follow up on those questions, unless there's any additional question. Cool. Well, then I'll start one by one. So the first question is narratives. This is a narrative question. What mind shifts have you found effective in you or others in analoging nature-based solution financing? Would you like to start, Benito? Nature-based solution financing.
Well, in our research about the relation, well, just to explain a little bit the context, when we start a project, we ask ourselves if our human, or as humans, we can increase life or increase the beautiful of life and nature or not, or if always will be in a position of like a parasims, no, that decrease the beautiful of nature. No? Learning from nature itself, and also for ancient communities, we arrived to the answer that we can increase nature and life and the beautiful of nature. No? For example, one of my favorites, it's a laboratory in Cusco. It's called Moray. It's a agriculture laboratory where the Incas explored in a very short space, not more than 200 meters of deep, how could they grow different species in a huge territory, in an infrastructure that replicate more than 2,000 meters of ecosystems. Imagine in a short space, 2,000 meters of ecosystem concentrated, so they can explore the conditions that they need to grow, for example, corn, different corns, in different ecosystems. And this knowledge, they extrapolate to the territory and increase the biodiversity. It's not an accident to have more in this region of the Andes communities, more than 2,000 kind of corns, for example. And this symbiotic relationship in between culture and nature, we call the regenerative cycling or biocultural regenerating cycling. So we learn from that and we say, okay, to empower this, we can add technology. The role of technology is to, for example, increase the impact, bring local communities the capability to measure the properties. This is something amazing also for, I remember when we trained the Ashaninkas community, for example, and they say, I know this plant is good for that, but I didn't know how much. Thank you to this lab, I can measure that. No? This is the connection between science and culture, and it can create a huge, huge impact. So in short, the connection in between nature and culture, it's a message of hope that we can find in this symbiosis solutions for our today challenge world.
Thank you, Benito. And Aldo, I think this question is for you. Biocultural innovators often do not have the network access to align investors and or time or resources to develop them. Given this, how are you identifying the pipeline or diligencing different projects?
Yeah, well, basically, we try to work with different actors which are on the ground. There are, for many years, NGOs have been supporting communities and projects, and they have developed capacities. So local NGOs are definitely key actors in the Student25 pipeline. But also now, more and more, we've seen that both the government and even the private sector are looking the Amazon as differently, not as a place, just to extract resources, but to find new opportunities and innovations, right? So I would say during the last maybe 3 years, have been a lot of investment from governments, from multilateral agencies, international cooperation, going to the Amazon to develop the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so there are now accelerators that are looking at the Amazon, laboratories in the Amazon, which is incredible. And I will say that more and more in the next few years, we will see a lot of opportunities also for investors to invest in these kind of companies that are not only producing raw materials, but now they are creating or innovating in countries. Sorry. And we will see lots of opportunities also in the future. Yeah.
Amazing, thanks, Aldo. And Walia, this question is for you. What do you think are the fair implications of sharing a deep knowledge, land and water? And what do you think are key examples of collaboration opportunities which are not destructive of indigenous values and knowledge?
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry, the first part.
The first one, the second question.
Oh, the first question.
What are the fair implications of sharing knowledge, land, and water?
Okay. I think everybody's knowledge is, what we talked about is like science, right? It's our own natural science. And when I was in government, it was cool. There was a big working group that designed, that was focused on indigenous knowledge. So every federal agency had a task to really support tribes and indigenous knowledge as science. And but our commitment as federal government to respect sacred sites protection and respect the knowledge that tribes hold, I think because in the past we've seen so many sacred sites when they were disclosed by tribes, or if it was publicly made known, people would go and desecrate these areas or do harm. And out of respect for tribes and their knowledge, we want to make sure that, we're being respectful and that there is sensitivity around certain places. So there's a whole protocol I think we need to understand. In general, when it comes to working with indigenous peoples, and I think in the past it's been very extractive when it comes to using knowledge that in ways that aren't beneficial to the people. So I think that's one area, but I feel like there's an abundance of pathways that we can lean on indigenous philosophy of being to design our way of life. And I'm talking about from when you're born to old age. Every indigenous nation or people, they have that blueprint of how to be in this world and the original instructions that were given in a really beautiful way. That's the unique part about being indigenous, is that they were given instructions in a sacred way to be aligned with nature, with our Mother Earth, with all things that are living. And, I take that to heart. I was raised in that way. And everything that I do, whether it's in business, investing, financing, government, it's with that knowledge that I carry. And it's not just like, siloed. It's in everything that I am every day. And so I think that's the unique part about indigenous peoples. When you have someone that you're working with that's indigenous, they're bringing not just themselves, they're bringing from time immemorial knowledge, and it's powerful. So.
Thank you, Alia. And last question, Benito, it's for you. You mentioned on biodiversity and the opportunities that it opens for new economies to develop that benefit the territories and also the ecosystems. So can you please share some examples on that?
Thank you so much. Yeah, for example, our methodology, it's first of all, we are developing labs in order to provide local communities the capability to develop all the product development, many different applications. Because in the traditional model, it's also an extractive model in terms of I go, extract the knowledge, and develop that outside of the territory in a university or in a company, and then it's back like a product. So our approach is bring all the capability to develop in the land, in the territory, all the process. This is one. The other is jump from a technological customer that I learn how to use, to learn how to create it. How can we create technology? Not just to use artificial intelligence or to use robotics or to use digital manufacturing. It's not to use, because when we learn or teach to use, we are creating dependence of logistic dependence, for example. If we want to make, a 3D printer or use a 3D printer, and when we finish the filament, they will need to import. So this is not a solution. This is a problem for the local community. So we show technologies, but especially focus in how to create new technologies inside the land. And then, especially when we want to transparent all the stakeholders around a product, and we want to consider as a beneficiary, or as a investor, to nature, naturally the cost of the product will increase. And this is hard in market. If you want to be honest with all the costs involved in a product, the cost compared with other products that are not considered nature and ancestral knowledge, etc., it's completely different. How can you compete with that? So in this case, technology helps us in order to not to make the traditional products. If we want to compete with similar products, for example, standardized products, we are going to lose. Our approach is to increase the values of the final product. It means very customized products, no? And clarify or make a traceability of all the actors involved to bring a product that could match exactly with the market and with the demand of the market to give back the benefits to all the part of the all the actors. Well, this is I tried to put in short, but finally, the ancestral knowledge and the new technologies will help us not to replicate the industry that we have today. No? It's to generate a new industry. No?
Amazing. Thank you, Benito. So we started with a question, biocultural innovation. How do we scale biocultural innovation? And we have been navigating through the different actors involved in biocultural innovation, from the nature-driven innovation, from the catalytic technical assistance perspective, which is pivotal to kickstart and actually scale the impact, and of course, the territory, the indigenous communities that steward the land and that are the backbone of any regeneration project. So I hope that you are as inspired and as excited about what's coming next. And I would love to ask you, please, if you can join me with a huge round of applause for our amazing speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.